Traveling around in Europe and Asia, we observed a strange trend. Young boys often take pleasure in playing warlike games. In Tibet, boys would use two wooden sticks to act out battles. One would pretend to be an invading warlord from a nearby kingdom, while the other assumed the role of a legendary hero venerated by many native Tibetans. Outside the Grand Teutonic Castle in Poland, vendors frequently sell an array of colorful plastic toy swords, reminiscent of medieval times. Even outside the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, we noticed a group of young boys armed with large toy machine guns, reenacting a fierce battle from the First World War. They built makeshift trenches using cardboard boxes and took cover behind them as they pretended to shoot at their opponents. I wonder if being a hero is a common childhood dream for many children. More intriguingly, I question how many adults who are visiting different war memorials truly understand the gravity of war and its profound impact on a nation's economic development and the shaping of national image.
There are many phases of wars. Among others, some of the stories are told from the invading soldiers who did not choose to kill, but who had to because a sense of duty, a sense of loyalty, and most badly because they want to make their parents proud.
In many popular films and books about the Second World War, German soldiers are frequently portrayed as ruthless and emotionless, devoid of empathy. Their perfectly tailored Hugo Boss uniforms add to their air of arrogance. It makes me wonder whether they were all raised by cruel figures who cast stark spells upon them from childhood years. Or did they fight for ideals they genuinely believed in, treating these ideas as if they were as sacred as the teaching of the Bible?
The German lads lived in a room like this, 3 of them. According to the stories which I read in the past, the general atmosphere was quite patriotic and without any space for privacy. I do not think they have a big mental space to reflect what they were doing. Each lad has a small cabinet like this, which they could store their necessary things like clothing, like shoes. There's one thing that lacks for a modern person like me. I feel quite frustrating. There isn't any bookshelf, and I'm wondering how often did they read the most fantastic work of their compatriots from the time of Enlightenment? And how often did they allow themselves to scrutinize the aim of the war?
Camaraderie in the military is a beloved theme in many war stories worldwide. In battle, young soldiers rely on each other, promising to protect one another with their lives if needed. Living so close together with little privacy, they naturally adopt the same attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Many young men join the military out of a sense of duty, coercion, or lack of other career options. The strong camaraderie and constant propaganda eventually influenced them. Over time, they became strong supporters of Nazi ideologies, including nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the belief in Aryan superiority.
In most heroic war narratives, we often glorify the self-sacrifice each and every warrior had to endure in order to fight for the nation's best. For instance, this is a story true for ammunition. 7 German soldiers have to work here day and night in order to secure the safety storage of all the ammunition. I'm just wondering how they felt when working here for hours in the middle of the winter. Finally, when the shift is over, all they have to see is the dark, cold Danish winter sky, without sunshine, without loved ones, without any consolation called love.
In modern warfare, a well-organized supply chain is crucial. Logistics support roles often go unrecognized in the media. Even if Germany had won the Second World War, their effort might never have been celebrated in novels or Hollywood films. German soldiers on the Eastern Front faced severe challenges like inadequate clothing, supplies, and shelter. In contrast, those stationed in Denmark experienced a relatively peaceful time despite their dual surroundings. I wonder what motivated the soldiers to continue their duties when they realized that Germany's war strategy was disliked by all its neighbors, and victory seemed very unlikely. In the early 1940s, Hitler ordered the construction of fortifications of Hanstholm in Denmark and Kristiansand in Norway to bolster Germany's defensive line between the two countries. These naval fortifications were designed to prevent British forces from accessing the Skagerrak Strait, a vital waterway linking the North Sea to the Baltic Sea. The Hanstholm and Kristiansand defenses were part of a larger strategy to secure Germany's northern approaches and protect the heavily fortified naval base at Kiel. To further secure the area, the German Navy laid approximately 60,000 naval mines between Hanstholm and Norway, forming an extensive minefield to prevent Allied naval forces from disrupting German shipping and operations.
Did war really end after the liberation in 1945? The real battlefield never appeared again. Nevertheless, the horror of war reverberates many years onwards. Altogether, 1.4 million of mines which Germans left to Denmark after 1945 in order to take away all the mines. Over 214 Danish died and another 377 wounded. I mean, the horror of war has many faces, including the suffering of people. And what is really horrifying is the last person who died of the German mine occurred in 2012, not that long ago.
In 1943, the famous German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel visited Danish bunkers, as revealed by the classified documents from the Third Reich. During his visit, Rommel and his entourage were convinced that an Allied attack on Hanstholm was highly likely. I often wonder how the soldiers stationed there cope with the constant uncertainty, always on edge, waiting for Allied air reconnaissance. Humans naturally tend to avoid danger, but these soldiers had no choice but to face it every day. Studies published in popular psychology magazines show that soldiers enduring such constant threats and unpredictability are at a high risk of developing long-term mental health issues. Chronic stress, depression, and anxiety disorders are common amongst them, with many suffering from conditions like PTSD despite their efforts to remain brave.
How old were the lads who fought in the German army during the wartime? 20, 22, 23, 24, 25. They were still young boys who hardly understand anything. At the same time, I think all of them understand what a machine gun could do when they're targeting towards the Danes, who obviously did not want to have anything to do with them.
It may be unfair to think that all German soldiers who gave their lives for Hitler's ambitions were just victims of misplaced loyalty to a madman. I wonder how many of them were inspired by old stories of heroes when they joined the army. I also wonder how many understood the immense scale of modern warfare, where violence was carried out by machines rather than by heroic acts. How did they see themselves in later years after gaining a new perspective on the war? Perhaps a villain, a monster, or just a person who allowed words to control their actions.
So the lads are celebrating Christmas together in 1941, a holiday which people kind of designed to celebrate the good deeds of Jesus, who are benevolent, who show the other cheek to the enemy when he has been beaten on one cheek. I'm just wondering, how was their fighting spirit in that particular day? Or how pious were they? Did they reflect upon what their judgment might be when they are entering the purgatory later, when they have said farewell to the earthly life? I'm wondering, when seeing all these happy or confusing faces, I cannot stop thinking how I would react if I were one of them.
Loyalty and discipline are essential military virtues. In medieval legends, a revered Christian soldier often pledges steadfast loyalty to his faith, viewing his battles and the defeat of opponents on foreign soil as acts of salvation for those who have not yet embraced the Lord's teachings. Similarly, Hitler encouraged young German soldiers to perceive their sacrifices as crucial to his vision of a greater German empire fighting against the Soviet Union and Western democracies. In this mindset, the act of killing young soldiers who fought against German forces was framed as a heroic deed. Additionally, Hitler aspired for Germany to replace the United Kingdom in controlling global trade routes, echoing the ambitions of a bygone era of colonialization.
While standing in front of a poignant painting of Jesus Christ, I start to ask myself, what was the meaning of being a soldier for Hitler? Was there a higher purpose which they could convince themselves? Or do they just want to be a good soldier, a good son to their mother, a good citizen to a crazy old man who hardly cares anything else than his own power? Since our childhood years, we were encouraged to listen, to follow somebody's guidance through life. The older I become, the more I start to think, why? How come we were taught to be humble rather than to be self-reliant? Why we were taught to follow that person, a dead rebellion's guidance, or a book which was written thousands of years ago, rather than making our own reflections, thinking about what is there in front of us. Why do we want to assimilate ourselves to a general purpose which we do not really understand at all? When thinking about the soldier who committed suicide because life is so hard in the Danish front, when thinking about all the soldiers passed away during Operation Barbarossa, I'm asking, who created all the monsters? Or who created all these crazy souls who could command a large number of people? Isn't our own educational institution which prize assimilation and synchronization that creates such a monstrous war machine?
In that corner of the local library, I discovered a book of letters penned by German soldiers stationed in Belgium, Denmark, and Poland during the Second World War. Their words echoed with a deep yearning for home. and weariness from the endless wait and the silent dread of attack yet to come. They longed for the comfort of familiar places, far from the subtle hostilities they faced. The letters spoke of their isolation and the quiet defiance of the locals, from veiled resistance to outright sabotage. As time wore on, the beating cold, meager warmth, and constant discomfort made their existence all the more unbearable.
This is indeed a wonderful landscape painting. It reminds me of the British landscape painting which John Constable once painted to give the overseas Brits a sense of the feeling of being home.
Hitler rose to power in Germany during a time of deep instability for the Weimar Republic, which was struggling with hyperinflation, political extremism, and the heavy burden of war reparations. Many Germans were eager to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, which they saw as humiliating and unjust. To reveal Hitler's true intentions, his opponents should have asked critical questions that pierced through his grand slogans during the elections. Doing so might have spared countless lives from being lost in the war, driven by his ruthless ambition.
Our soldiers has long gone away, but there is still a palpable eeriness which flies back and forth in the air as if every creature on the ground wants to tell their experience from the wartime.
On our way back, I could not help but reflect on how the severe treatment of deserters created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation within the German military. Soldiers who chose to abandon their mission faced harsh penalties, including execution, with little chance for amnesty and leniency. I wonder what might have happened during the Second World War. If many soldiers had been mature, well-educated individuals rather than young teenagers, would the close camaraderie and philosophical training had fostered a more critical perspective, challenging the rigid social conventions that punish independent thought.